Yeah, all good. All good. Good morning. Nice, peaceful early morning walkie. Nice, beautiful spring early morning. Got up early this morning at 6ish and have gone out for a nice walk as you did, a few laps and nice and peacefully. Beautiful morning. And yeah, and I was doing a bit of reflecting on a convo I had a few months ago with a coach that works in football. It was we talked about promoting coaches from the boot room, just as you do at a convo. And it just sort of was reflecting on, I suppose, promoting coaches from the boot room. It's probably traditionally famously associated to Liverpool Football Club, where the club used to maintain a structure where that at managerial level you have former coaches who sort of would come through and become managers. I suppose you could make a case in point. Promoting from the boot room could be also, bringing sort of coaches through, even sort of former players who understand the DNA of a club and promoting the coaches' roles, or various sort of roles, not just managerial roles, but from a little perspective was more around sort of coaches going on to be managers from within. And I sort of reflected to a time where I was doing some coaching in America in June 2014. I went out to do a bit of coaching in America. It was through a player I knew that when I was when I was fitness coach performance coach at Berry with the youth team, there's a player, Ryan, who ended up going out to the States, and at that point anyway, he set up like an academy, like a football academy. I think it was Pro Sports Pathways or something along them lines anyway. But anyway, he invited me over to do some coaching out there June 2014. He also invited a few other coaches, including Roy Evans, former Liverpool Football Club manager Roy Evans. And you could make a case in point that Roy Evans was probably the last of the boot room managers, so to speak, I would say. And I spoke to Roy, about a number of things and around football, and fantastic bloke, by the way, top man, really, really top man, Roy. Great person, to speak to, really fascinating, and you talk about football as well and that sort of stuff. But I sort of spoke to him, about the boot room, sort of his thoughts and so on and so forth, amongst other things. And I suppose I was thinking, and these are my thoughts, not Roy's, anybody else's, in terms of the positive, negatives, what I reckon around that. And at Liverpool, my understanding that from conversations with sort of Roy, and that the boot room was like a small windowless room at Anfield, where coaches would sort of gather around and have a cup of tea, maybe something a little bit stronger than a cup of tea every now and again, and they'd talk about sort of the players and tactics and other stuff, so to speak. And I suppose every club to a certain extent has a bit of a boot room. Even sort of, I remember sort of at Bake Up, when I was doing some sort of coaching there, performance coaching, it'd be Brent, Andy Hill, myself, we'd go into sort of a windowless room, and talk about tactics and other things. And then obviously when Folgate come in, and I had my second stint at Bake Up, so we'd go into the room and talk tactics, players and other stuff, and there'd be no windows. And so I suppose you could argue many clubs around the country have got their own little sort of boot room, so to speak. But cutting a long story short, what I reckon about the positives and negatives around sort of bringing coaches through the boot room, not just sort of managers, but sort of coaches in general. I think on a positive note, you bring coaches through to become managers, or even promote coaches from within. The positive is they understand the DNA of the club. They really understand the club, the DNA. It brings stability. They know what it means to the fans. They know the stability From a tactical perspective, you don't have to sort of change things too much. You've got a way of playing. You can tweak things. I suppose from a coaching perspective, it's quite motivating to know you've got a chance to get promoted, so to speak. So there is that. So I think there are positives, at least in my perspective, around that. But I suppose I would also argue a negative perspective. You get a lack of fresh perspective. So, for example, you want fresh ideas. There's a lack of fresh perspective. I think sometimes it can be a bit stagnant, as well. And also it's limiting. You're limiting yourself to like a narrower window of selecting the right person for the job. So you can sometimes you can look further afield and maybe get sort of a coach. You can bring someone in like further afield who's the best, one of the best going round, where sometimes you bring a sort of coach through, it can take a bit of time for them to develop as well. So, there is that too. I think there's, positive negatives for either or. So I suppose, I think on the positive note, you've got that stability, the continuation in the boot room. But I think from a negative perspective, you don't sort of get sometimes a fresh perspective, someone sort of coming in from the outside. And also you can limit yourself to choices, so to speak. But that's my take on it. Be great to know what your take is on it as well. That's just the way I see it. But it'd be great to hear what your take on it is as well. So yeah, all good.